nutrition wasn't even a word back then. I mean, like that people talked,
Mm,
like it wasn't something that people taught, it wasn't a common word in our diet. Like now it's part of our vernacular. And so,
right.
so the awareness for nutrition has grown like immensely, like almost like, and I remember, I think I was telling you about at one point, like how I would, I did community education. I was always education based because I'm from a education based family. My twins a teacher, my mom's a teacher, my grandfather's a teacher. Essentially, I'm a teacher, but I'm a teacher of nutrition
Love that.
because I also care about medicine and health, and I've always had that. Yes, and that experience obviously tipped me into the natural health direction and the nutritional health direction. But yeah, so it's different. I was telling you that I started in community education, and I used to bring literally projectors, like big projectors. It was me. I had a partner teacher, partner nutritionist, and we had to roll our projector slide, so we could project in a classroom at night in a community education setting. This is in Minneapolis, but yeah, so we're
Wheeling the
educating. So
projector cards. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Wow.
Like, yeah, it was a huge projector. We had two people to move it, literally.
Wow. Put in
So,
work. You put in that work. Yeah.
yeah, so I'm super old. No, just kidding. No, my point is that I know what the field's done, and back then, it was a totally different conversation because nobody really. It was processed foods are only people don't realize this, but processed foods have really only been popularized. I think we were talking, but well, over the past obviously 100 years, but Kraft Food Company went out of business. I researched at one point they started after World War I, I believe. Don't quote me on exactly these minor facts, but just understand the whole, but basically they went out of business. They had to claim bankruptcy, and then they went back into business for World War II, and then it was off to the races. And that pretty much epitomizes. I say that as a Kraft that epitomizes though the journey of the food industry, because women, during World War I, the men went away to war, and it was, and we needed packaged food for them. So that was one of the first. That's when we first started. So packaged food came not because it was for the women, but for the men who were away,
Wow.
at war. And then obviously when they came back, then and after the Second World War, what happened was, and that's for Betty Crocker. But when they came back, it was so helpful. Processed foods were so helpful that
So
we
simple and easy.
iconicized them. Yeah, we
Wow.
iconicized them. So and then of course, then we had things like automobiles, televisions happening through the 50s and then into the 70s, 80s. And so really processed foods haven't been super popularized, I would venture to say, until the 80s.
Wow.
Literally, where it becomes so mainstream. And now, so the landscape of food culture has changed so much. So now, I'm always like a little bit like I'm not surprised anymore, but at first I was surprised when I was having certain clients like around the age 22, 3, that because it's changed and there was a gap where I hadn't seen that age group, but now I'm starting to see those people again. That when I'm listening to what they're eating, they're literally waking up and deciding where do they want to go for breakfast. So every single meal, and they don't even go to the grocery store. Never been to the grocery store.
Wow.
I've had clients, I've never guys that are in their got not nothing against guys. I'm just saying it's like normal for a lot of
Yeah.
people that have you know never gone grocery shopping or don't go grocery shopping, period, as our culture. So basically we're relying on these fast food, on these restaurants,
Hmm.
which it's a I don't want to label anybody at this point, or probably ever, but my point is that but people are getting sicker. Like the millennials are the first generation that's ever in history to be sicker than their
Yeah.
parents. Than their parents. So the first ones.
Well, and that's a
And
fact. Like no,
that's a
not
fact that
not
I was
targeting
saying.
millennials here. Yeah, it's just a
Yeah,
fact.
no, yeah, I heard
Yeah.
it on the community care
Yeah.
audio
Yeah.
series that I was listening to. Yeah. So
Wow.
but the point is that there's an awareness. So there's like a multi thing happening, right? Because there's like a lot more awareness. Like I think I told you, like back in the early 2000s when I was educating about things like gluten, because I was
Mm,
researching myself that it could cause inflammation in the body, and started to be linked to autoimmune diseases and gut diseases and different problems back then.
mhm.
But people had never heard the word gluten because the processed food only started to really come of such a quantity and such a consistency into the 80s, 90s, and now 2020s. But so things have changed a lot, I guess, is what I'm
Right.
trying
Right.
to kind of summarize. But obviously, we could take it into more detail. But Yeah, it's changed.
Those are great
Uh,
points, though. I mean, that's like eye-opening, like the history and how things are now, unfortunately. I mean, it sounds like it's for the better, but also in a way for the worst, you know?
yeah, yeah, and everything can be, sort of tackled, even if it's a problem now. It doesn't have to be a problem forever. So that's why I think we're getting together to talk about this, is because we know there is there's a lot of information out there, but at the same time, there's still a lot of information that needs to be shared.
Yeah,
And, if we can get the same people who have been, a lot of people are coming down with major diseases now around the brain, or just chronic things, problems, whether it's lethargy and fatigue, or whether it's, depression, anxiety. I mean,
yeah,
almost every young person that I know that I speak to tells me straight out they have anxiety. And I think part of that has to do with things like obviously the pandemic. Everyone, that's the first thing everyone says, but
of
it's
course.
true. But all the telecommunications, lack of personal contact, insecurity in our world. There's all these things happening, that would lead anyone to have anxiety as something that they experience regularly.
Of course.
I guess, and I'm not even sure what my point is here, except that as a nutritionist, I always go back to the fact that we can offset, create better energy, including anxiety. We can bring that down through foods, or not, consuming as much coffee, for instance. Um, but also that we can start to secure ourselves and our health, since we now know that food is medicine, and that's something that's changed a lot in terms of awareness. Is like when I started, people didn't, again, the word nutrition didn't exist. So
Yeah,
now they're realizing, everyone kind of knows now, that when I talk with people now versus then, they all realize that food is medicine.
yeah,
Ginger, turmeric, and so that's good. So people are really tuning into a lot of good things, and that's fantastic. But
yeah.
but yeah, I think there's still some things to continue on, and there's new problems because of the fact of kind of how our culture has evolved. So
Yeah.
coming, yeah.
And I love that point. I mean, that's what I was getting out of it. Like offsetting, like putting it in balance.